Hi everyone, I am here with a true story from the book we've been reading. This one is by Judith Victoria Hensley, and it is called He Floated in Front of the Cross. As a child, I was sure I heard the voices of angels worshiping God in the melody of babbling brooks that ran across my parents' mountain property. I sometimes thought I saw those angels sitting in the tree branches among the dogwoods in spring. I even heard the heavenly choir lifting praises to God in the majesty of a sunset. I was certain the whirlpool and the bobolink were conducting their evening vespers to God when their lonesome calls sounded. These things were normal to me. I thought everyone's heart belonged to God and beat in harmony with the vast creation that worshiped Him. I was surprised when I first found out that others were skeptical, that I'd seen or heard anything heavenly, and I was shocked when I discovered that others could not see or hear those things that were so precious to me. Whether it was through the doubt of others or the transition of growing older, my commune with God through nature vanished from my life. However, my faith in God never faltered. My belief that He cared for me as an individual, and my firm conviction that God constantly communicates with those who pay attention never diminished. But years passed before I saw or heard anything else of a spiritual nature that was unusual. Every August, Armentino, Illinois, we looked forward to it from one year to the next. We would camp there. We exchanged letters with our youth camp friends through the winter months and counted down the calendar until we would all be in one big happy family again for that 1 week of August. It was an amazing adventure for so many teenagers to worship and learn about God together. It was like a bit of heaven coming down just for us. I went to youth group. Did you guys go to a youth group? I went after school. It was like once a week, and it was really fun. We went on a trip once, trip. It was here in our state still. It wasn't a camp or anything like that. It was like, I think it was just for like one day or a weekend. I know it was for a weekend, I think. Yeah, because we stayed overnight. Some woman that went to that church let us spend the night in her house. She had a humongous house, and we had breakfast the next day. She had all kinds of food down there for us for breakfast. I mean, like halves of grapefruits and all cereals, all kinds of stuff. It was really fancy. And then we had these big dinners at the thing and had a Christian dance. And, you know, they talked to us and we did other little things. It was really fun. But I loved the youth group. I loved it. One summer, a special event was scheduled for the last evening of camp, an outdoor drama of the story of Christ's life called The Crucifixion. We didn't have to memorize a script. The presentation was recorded, and I would be played over speakers outdoors. We only had to walk through the motions in costumes, remember our cues, and flow with the pre-recorded recitation and musical score. I played one of the women at the foot of the cross. As we practiced, I felt chills as I thought of what it would have been like to be there with Jesus Christ when He was nailed to the cross, wounded and bloody. What agony must have been felt as the women and men who loved Him watched Him die. The disappointment, fear, and lack of understanding must have been devastating. I entered that world each time we practiced. Yeah. Anytime you get upset about anything that's like minor, the littlest things, think about Mary and her having to watch her son die that way. how hard that would have been to be a mother and see your child, no matter how old your child is, and Jesus was 33, but to see your child like that. The week progressed as usual, with meals in the mess hall, morning Bible classes, afternoon activities like softball and volleyball, and nightly services. In between, we practiced walking through the crucifixion. On the last evening, the area we would use for our performance was roped off. The audience would watch from a hillside, looking onto the field where the action would take place. As church groups, pastors, and parents began to show up for the performance, I felt a holy reverence in the air. From the moment the soundtrack began to play, amplified through the trees across the field and up the hillside, something was different about it. Perhaps the volume was turned up higher than it had been all week. Possibly the hundreds of pairs of eyes trained on us heightened our awareness. Whatever was going on felt very different from our rehearsals. When we reached the crucifixion scene, the cat-o'-nine decals that was used to whip Jesus across his back had been stained with red food coloring so that it looked like blood. Streaking from the actor's body. The thud of the iron on the wood as it simulated nailing the spikes through his hands was bone-jarring and heart-rending. Oh. I seen a play like this. It seemed very, very, very real. They did a really good job, and it was so sad. By the end of the presentation, people were breaking through the ropes and coming forward at the invitation to ask Jesus Christ into their lives and to give their hearts to God. They pressed in around me as I knelt on the ground before an empty cross. I had never before seen such an emotional response from a crowd. Eventually, the emotion subsided. The service broke up and the people were chatting as they left the performance field. Some stragglers stayed behind longer to pray or talk with one another on the lawn. But a small group of us could not leave. Still in costume, still on our knees before an empty cross, we could not leave that holy place. As I knelt there, I poured my heart out to God. I wanted him to know how much I loved him. I wanted Jesus to know that I realized his suffering and sacrifice were for me. I wanted my life to count for God's kingdom. As a teenager, I had no worldly goods to give, no riches to lay down at his feet. I had nothing to offer him except my love, my heart, myself. I wanted God to accept the gift of my life, a gift I offered of my own free will. His presence was so real that he seemed to walk among a dozen or so who had stayed behind. And we could not end the connection so easily. He was so real, I was afraid to look up, afraid of what I might see, yet compelled to look at the same time. When I raised my head, I saw him there, in white robes, shining in the waning light. He was literally floating in front of the cross, his hands reaching toward us. The love was palpable. Looking in the direction where I saw the figure, we all seemed to be suspended for a moment outside of time. I heard no audible noise, but I heard his message in my heart. Many are called, but few are chosen. I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Matthew 22:14, 28, 20. When the figure disappeared, the sound of sobbing renewed briefly, and almost on cue we stood. We all knew something incredible, a true spiritual encounter had taken place, and we had shared it. But no one talked about it. I don't know If they shared it with their friends or family, I tried to, but just as I had learned as a child, if others don't see or hear what you have seen or heard, they can't understand it or grasp it as real. Oh, I was telling you guys. Through the years, I have thought of those who knelt in the grass that day. I've wondered if they spent their lives serving the Lord. I did find out years later that several were in the ministry. Perhaps they received their calling that night. I am not sure that I ever accomplished any grand thing, but I have tried to serve the Lord in everything I do, one day at a time. I listen for his voice and am assured that he still speaks to his children and that all the nature declares his glory. The brooks still sing their songs to him. Creation still declares his glory. Angel choirs still praise him, and the most I have to offer him is my heart, my love, my life, all of me. And that's all he wants.